the concept of the tripartite nature of man. Okay, the concept of the tripartite nature of man. Man is a spirit. He has a soul. He lives in a body. Now, man fundamentally is a relational being. Are you getting this? Man is a relational being because with that relationship, your psychological and emotional well-being will be hampered.
Everything that we are doing, this is our little contribution to our time. We cannot be dashing money to people, but we have our time, we have our knowledge, we have our experiences. We need to share. I am confident that what we are doing today is valuable to people.
Yes. Now, the beauty of bringing the African psychology is that it's a simple thing. Let me use this case scenario. 2 weeks ago, we have a group of professionals from Eswatini in our university. They just started the level 6 diploma in child psychology. So during the induction, I asked a question. A child that is born in Eswatini and a child that is born in London, what is the main difference? Of course, the socio-cultural context. However, that child biological psychology is the same. That is, they will develop in different phases, different stages, according to what? Biological psychology. However, the socio-cultural theory of learning will influence their growth.
Hi, and thank you for checking out Obehi Podcast. We encourage people to own their story and share it with the world to expand their purpose. Before we start this presentation, I have something to quickly share with you. Are you a purpose-driven entrepreneur? Do you want to cut across the noise and attract your ideal client by leveraging your own story? Then pay attention. I have a signature program that can help you own your story. A 5-step transformative journey to reshape your professional and business narrative for success in less than 90 days. And it's available at academy.aclasses.org/story. This is what we have understood. Storytelling is the most powerful instrument known to man. And this is what that could mean to you. You can either own your story and use it to advance your purpose in your business and professional life, or someone else will do. The choice is yours. Now let's get started with today's episode of the Obehi Podcast.
Yes, once again, we welcome all our viewers across the globe on this podcast today, especially our special focus on our African people in both diaspora and our African people in the African continent. In my capacity as the roving ambassador of the State of African Diaspora, the 6th region of the African Union, I'm making this presentation for us to look at our unity through exploring the principle of collaboration through African Indigenous Psychology. And therefore, I would like you to sit and enjoy this my short presentation on the unity from African Indigenous Psychology. We all know about the concept of Pan-Africanism, the idea that peoples of African descent have common interests and should be unified. Historically, Pan-Africanism has often taken the shape of political or cultural movement, and there are many varieties of that. And what do we mean by this? If you look at the movement, it was dedicated to establishing the independence for African nations and cultivating unity among Black people throughout the world. In its original conferences held in London in 1900, 1919, 1921, and 1923, and other cities, Webb Du Bois was principally early leader of that movement and is alive today and around the world. And what it's tend to promote is continental cooperation, command joint military forces to send to conflict zone, regularly debate the pros and cons of greater unification. And my goal today, the core concept that I want to explore today is indigenous psychology based on African psychology as a platform for unification of Africa in terms of our intellectual life. So, African indigenous psychology can also be defined as an intellectual worldwide movement against the hegemony of Eurocentric psychologies in their reflected or unreflected missionary path of promoting Eurocentric tradition under a scientific appearance. What do I mean by that? We can see that there is a greater awareness and there's a movement now about indigenous psychology. However, our special focus of indigenous psychology, which is has to do with the psychology of the indigenous people across the globe in the third world. And the indigenous people are known as the first nation people, people of indigenous, which in every continent, different continent apart from Africa continent. But my goal this very afternoon is to narrow it down to look at the African indigenous psychology. And the question of that is to look at how does African indigenous psychology can lead to unity among our intellectual life and our psyche, and using African indigenous psychology, promoting it to be a vehicle for the decolonization and emancipation agenda from new colonization that we are experiencing today in Africa. Having said that, what then is African psychology? What is the concept of that? Now, as highlighted in that definition, African psychology can be taken to refer to the systematic and informed study of the complexities of human mental life, culture, and experience in the pre and the post-colonial African world, quote and unquote. So we now see that our African psychology is a distinctive way, and because it's so unique to us African. And as we know that when you look at the issue of psychology, the Greek root of psychology from the word psyche and logos, psyche means the mind of the principle of life, and logos means to study. So psychology is a study of the mind. But now looking at African psychology, we are talking about the study of the mental life of the African people. Now, because when you now look at psychology itself, the argument here is that psychology is culturally bound, is cultural bound, in the sense that people in their different socio-cultural setting have different ways of seeing life and different ways of cultural existence. And now that requires that we cannot impose Eurocentric psychology on the African people, because they look at life from a different perspective. And therefore, to study African, you must look through the lens of African psychology, because they have been operating on their own indigenous ontologies over the years before the imperialists and the colonial master invaded our land and our culture. Therefore, the study of the complexities of the human mental life, and that is the key, human mental life, the culture and the experience, the pre-colonial era and the post-colonial era. That is the beauty, and that is what African indigenous psychology entails right now in this 21st century. You have to look at African mindset in the pre-colonial. You have to look at it then in the post-colonial African world to study us and to understand the uniqueness of our mentality and how we interpret our world. Again, African psychology is a post-colonial discipline that studies the cultures, experiences, and the peoples of Africa in the past and present. Now, it is a practice-oriented discipline that draws inspiration from many humanities disciplines and intellectual traditions, including African philosophy, literature, religion, archaeology, and anthropology. Now, African psychology is concerned with studying the psychological significance of worldviews, the worldview of Africans, ways of knowing, and that is it. That is our epistemology. So we have our indigenous Africa ontology, we have our indigenous Africa epistemology, then our oral traditions and metaphors, and then both healing traditions and the psychotherapies within the socio-cultural settings of the African people in both the pre-colonial and the post-colonial era. So that is the definition of African psychology itself there. And some say that African psychology should be an inclusive psychology, that studies the human condition and culture in contemporary Africa, as well as African indigenous psychology. Now, it may also involve adopting aspects of Western psychology that are relevant to addressing the challenges of Africa's present predicament. Now, this is a very important point, because when we're looking at African psychology, the question is that we are not completely disregarding or dissociating ourselves from the Western psychology, because there are universal principles within the Western psychology that is also applicable and relevant to the African psychology. What does that mean? It's that what we need to do is what the contextualization and indigenization of Western psychology principles within the terrain of African psychology. And that is the key. So we are not completely ignoring or saying that we have nothing to do with Western psychology. We are going to look at Western psychology through the lens of indigenous African psychology. That is what we are advocating for in terms of unity of Africa psychology there. Again, African psychology or Black psychology is a dynamic manifestation of unifying African principle, values, and tradition. It is the self-conscious centering of psychological analysis and application in African realities, culture, and epistemology. Now, what is the goal of that? What do we want to achieve, by African psychology goal? Number one, challenging and correcting the myths of Africa inferiority. That is very important for us to know, that we Africans are not inferior to the Europeans or to any race or any continent in the world. So the African psychology, we want to correct the myths of African inferiority. Secondly, we want to promote research and scholarship on the psychology of Africans in the continental Africa. That is another goal of African psychology. Also, helping Africans regain belief in themselves and their identity as Black African. Also, African psychology goal is to promote the understanding of African people as psychological subject, also relating psychology to its local cultural audience. See, I spoke about the indigenization and contextualization of the cultural psychology of the African people. So we are talking about cultural psychology study of the African people, and then also the cross-cultural psychology, looking at it from the lens of the indigenous ontology, indigenous epistemology of the African people, also providing solution to the problems in the modern and globalized Africa social and cultural environment. Now, that's why I'm putting this argument forward, that African psychology should be at the center stage of our intellectual emancipation process. To bring unity to Africa, we need to address our new colonization of our intellectual life by now adopting and embracing the principles and the philosophies of African psychology. And that will help us in the emancipation process. Why collaboration? Collaboration is very important. Collaboration is not simply interaction between colleagues. It is involved two or more individuals working towards a common goal and creating a new product, like an idea or a solution, an insight beyond what they could have achieved individually. Now, it's what we're calling for now is collaboration. Okay, collaboration in the sense that we need to come together as African academians and intellectuals to come and embrace African psychology. It is very important for us to do this, because collaboration is the way forward to bring unity. And then we have to do that in the same way. The principles of collaboration, you can say, focus. Focus. We are talking about, in terms of organization, or focus on nation before organization. Okay, we're also talking about manage through trust. Not control. Promote others, not yourself. Build constellations, not stars. You see, these principles of collaboration are key for us to embrace the unifying force of African psychology as a way of promoting unity among us. Because we Africans, we have a unique way of thinking, we have a unique way of seeing things, and that's why there's a need for us to embrace and to promote the principle of African psychology as a field, not only in academia, but also within the educational perspective, in the journey of decolonization of our psychological life, and to follow the principle of collaboration. Number one, you were talking about focus on mission, before organization. There's a mission, and this mission we are arguing, we are promoting today, is the mission of bringing African psychology at the center of the intellectual domain in African studies, and to manage trust and not control. We are not saying control, we want to promote others, not ourselves. We want to build constellation. And this is very important, and then that also sits very well with the concept of Ubuntu. One of the key drivers of this culture of diversity in Africa is the concept of Ubuntu, a traditional African philosophy that emphasizes the interconnectedness of all people and the importance of sharing and helping others. And we believe that the concept of Ubuntu can also be expressed through the African psychology because it is residing in our psyche as Africans. And so we need this collaboration, to improve the quality of works. We need this collaboration, to bring African indigenous education. And these principles are very important because African psychology now become the foundation of building indigenous African curriculum. And that is a very important because our educational life, our intellectual life is a key force to bring unity. When Bob Marley sang about emancipation from mental slavery, to do that, the mind needs to be decolonized. And my argument is that for the mind need to be decolonized, we need to go through that decolonization through African psychology as the basis for creating our new curriculum. Not just only decolonizing the curriculum now, we are talking about creating a new curriculum through African Indigenous Education Principle. Now, and when you look at African Indigenous Education Principle, we talk about personal relationships there. We talk about character formation is the main element and primarily formed through relationship with other people. Holisticism is an holistic approach because we believe in African education philosophy that the mind is not only aspect of the development, the spiritual side of a man is also part of its essential nature of its identity. And in Africa, indigenous spirituality is a key factor. When we look at our concept of identity, we think, our cultural identity as Africa is engaged in spirituality. So we understand this, and that should be the focus and the founding pillars for developing our curriculum so that we can have this intellectual emancipation through education. And that is the key thing and is very important. So for me, unity has to come through education in Africa. African indigenous education is experiential knowledge based on the relational worldview and culture. The African worldview includes wholeness, community, harmony, which are deeply embedded in cultural values. So you see, our African indigenous education philosophy is embedded in community, it's embedded in harmony, and these are the deepest value system of our cultural system in Africa. And we need to promote this through African unity. Thank you for listening to this short lecture.
Thank you so much, sir. This is really beautiful. I am sure that we have a lot to cover here in this conversation today. We have a lot to cover because there are different aspects of the conversation that need more exploration because it is fundamentally important to run as far as I can see. So the first question I would like to ask you, Professor Oluwafemi, is people don't understand where the idea of African unity is coming from. Because, in the course of the conversation, I'm also going to touch a bit of our culture because when we are talking about our belief system, our way of life, our conception, it is not just intellectual concept. These are, I will show example of what have happened in my village so people can understand that it is a deeply rooted concept. So the question is, African unity, where is this idea even coming from? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, you can see the philosophy of Ubuntu is engaged in our in our indigenous education philosophy, you see that our indigenous education philosophy in Africa is built on harmony, is built on communal system. So African unity has always come from our cultural value system, the fabric. But the sad reality is that when colonial master came, they started sowing the seed of discord, and they used the principle of, for example, in the British colonial era, in most African countries that are colonized, there's what they call the divide and the rule, divide and rule, divide and rule, divide and rule tactics there. And I believe that one of the trauma of colonialism is the still residing in our psyche. That divide and rule is still there. And that's why we are struggling today to bring African unity. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I want to look for a kind of a psychological understanding. When we say unity, what does it even really mean in itself? Psychologically speaking, why do we need unity in a society, and why is it so fundamental?
Yes. So beautiful question you ask. I will go to the concept of the tripartite nature of man. Okay. The concept of the tripartite nature of man. Man is a spirit. He has a soul. He lives in a body. Now, man fundamentally is a relational being. Are you getting this? Man is a relational being, because with that relationship, your psychological and emotional well-being will be hampered. Man cannot survive by living in isolation. So therefore, his psyche has to connect with other people. So man is not an island. So because of the fundamental, it's a need. And when you look at absolute Maslow hierarchy of need, is motivation, the need for self-esteem, it's a need in man. It has nothing to do with individuality. You cannot survive alone among the ecosystem. So man is inherently a relational being. Therefore, to be relational, you have to embrace what? Unity. So it's a fundamental need, not just a desire. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for that. I remember just now when you were giving the short lecture, you made mention of Pan-Africanism and all those beautiful ideas, of course, that was promoted in the system. Okay, before the system, in the 15, the system, leading to independence to countries like Ghana, and of course also in Nigeria, another part of Africa like Kenya and other. And today, people still talk about it. I remember, for example, a couple of months ago, maybe it should be, okay, last year actually, I interviewed a member of Nkrumah government. Okay, the man is old now, but he was part of the government, meaning he knew the guy, he was there. He saw what happened there up until the time that Nkrumah was actually ousted, where Nkrumah was going to Vietnam to intervene between the American war and Vietnam. And of course, we can understand that might not necessarily be a very good thing for the American government and all of that. Then later, of course, we see publication showing that the CIA might have actually played a part in the coup that led to Ghana removing Kwame from power. So one of the questions I was actually asking this man, and I think I want to ask it to you too, is whether we are able to understand, we're able to take the idea and bring it in the practical terms. Because later, also in my work, in 2015, I did a documentary where I actually spoke about Pan-Africanism, and I titled it Pan-Africanism, Testing Idea on Reality, in that we have Pan-Africanism as an idea, but we have real things also that we can see. We need to marry both of them together. Yeah. And we really marry it together. Is it practical?
Thank you. That's a very pertinent question, and we are going to be honest with ourselves. As you know, that my perspective when it comes to the issue of humanity is coming from spirituality and from the psychological perspective of our existence. And as a therapist, what we found out, there is a colonial trauma. That colonial trauma, now, even scientifically, it has been established through epigenesis that our ancestral pain are being carried to next generation. Now, what colonial trauma does, and if you look at African psychology development, we're looking at African mental life pre-colonial, post-colonial. Now, the post-colonial era is riddled with the colonial trauma, and what colonial trauma does is the inferiority complex. Now, when anybody is suffering from that inferiority complex, what you cannot achieve unity through inferiority complex. Secondly, the seed of discord by the divide and rule system that have been sold in the colonial era and the post-colonial era by the imperialists is still in the psyche of people. And so in the practical terms, it's a difficult thing to have the reality of unity because of the trauma, secondly, and because of the divide and rule, which is also still remain in the subconscious mind of most Africans. That is what a major challenge in bringing unity. And that's why we are promoting African psychology as the way forward.
All right. Later, we'll talk about some of the solution, because here we don't just talk about the problem. We'll talk also what are the way forward. How do we dismantle this mirage where all of us are just strongly, where we are in the midst of abundance, but we are just strong. We are barely surviving. We are barely surviving in the midst of abundance. And any person that have listened to your extensive explanation of the psychological trauma that a lot of our political leaders are suffering from, and therefore the people of Africa are suffering from, it will sometimes come to make sense to them why we continue to suffer, even though we have everything in front of us, because we are responding to a program that was not designed by us and for us. Therefore, that program can never work for us. And so we must look for a way to free ourselves from that shackles so that we can work for ourselves based on what we need, and based on our interests, and based on how we want to be seen in the world. So those are important conversations that we need to have too. Now, because this podcast is focused mostly on the African diaspora and of course the Africans in Africa. Now, the topic we are talking about today, looking at the African unity. Now, you are also part of the diaspora in the sense that you are an African, but who is living in the UK. How important, how relevant is this conversation to the African diaspora?
Thank you for that question. Now, we Africans in diaspora, we have been blessed by the fact that we find ourselves here in especially in the European countries, or in the US, European countries, the Western world. So any African living in the Western world is opportune to be exposed to the education system there. However, even though the education system there tend to condition your thinking, but we cannot deny the fact that there is opportunity for you to explore and to maximize your potential. So why is unity important for us? Because we have stepped out of the shores of Africa. We can look at Africa from the outside world there, and then we can also see our problem and how to solve it. Therefore, to do that, we need collaboration among Africa in diaspora. And that's why the State of African Diaspora was set up by the African Union as a nation itself, because it is estimated that the State of African Diaspora is 350 million people of African descent are living outside Africa. Look at that huge number. And they contributed over $65 billion to Africa economy by sending money home. So we need to come together as a force for the liberation and the raising of the dignity of our African continent.
You see, that is important. I know that we're going to come back again in the ending part of this conversation where we shall be looking at the solution. Because also in your presentation, you didn't make mention of the conferences that were held in London, because that is where I think the first time the word Pan-Africanism was used, or if I'm not mistaken, that is in the 1900s. We now say that the Africans in the diaspora have a pivotal role to play in the salvation of Africa. Of course, by salvation, I'm not looking at other people to come to our rescue. I'm looking at us to come to our rescue. When I say African in the diaspora, they are not actually different people. Just that they are not physically present in Africa, but they are still African. They understand that they are African. Of course, they should do. If they don't, then that is a bigger problem for themselves. So I believe that our role must be important. We must realize that we have a significant role. We'll come to the solution later on. But
Mm-hmm.
because we are talking about Africa, and most of what we are doing is also looking for a way to connect our idea to the root, which is Africa, African culture, African
Yeah.
belief system, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to speak, looking at it from the point of view of Yoruba culture.
Okay.
How do you explain collaboration? How do you explain this unity, looking at it from Yoruba culture?
Now, I mean, thank you. I mean, by the way, for our audience, I'm a Yoruba man from the western part of Nigeria, one of the ancient, and not only that, Yoruba is even extended to over 4 to 5 countries in West Africa. We are also one of the most spoken language outside Africa. So the Yoruba tribe is a global tribe that is one of the most studied cultural research. You know, the evidence is there about Yoruba people. And so Yoruba people, they have many wisdom words in adages, you know, that they use. In Unity, when I was growing up, they used to say that when you want to carry a load on your head, you cannot use one hand. So you use 2 hands, you know. And they say in Yoruba, "Agbajo la fi n gberu sori," meaning that you use all your 10 fingers, your hand, to carry a load on your head. You cannot just use one hand. So, and that is the principle of unity from the anatomy of the human body. If you look at the African psychology, you have to look at it from the pre-colonial, okay, and the colonial African world. So if you look at our African psychology from the pre-colonial world, that culture existed. Then what happened? What changed? Then colonialism came into play, okay? And when it came into play, the post-colonial Africa is a different Africa with a different mindset, with a different value system. And I will still go back to what I said. There is something that happened in our psyche. There is a psychological damage. That is the colonial trauma. That trauma is generational, my brother. That trauma affects the value system. That people now become materialistic and very individualistic. That's it.
Materialistic and individualistic. We have been given a mask to wear. This mask does not represent who we are. Now we are confused. We talked about identity crisis the other day. That was an in-depth conversation. That was really very beautiful. You and Dr. Tawanda. You know, everything that we are doing, this is our little contribution to our time.
Yeah.
We cannot be dashing money to people, but we have our time, we have our knowledge, we have our experiences. We need to share. I am confident that what we are doing today is valuable to people. People who are going to be here, we look at this record, they will find value in it. That is what I'm saying. All right. Now, when you look at the diaspora, look at the African diaspora, whether you are looking at those in the UK where you live, or in the US or Canada, or in other part of Europe, we understand that we want to work together. But you know what I found? Many of us find it difficult to work among ourselves, even those of us that are here in the diaspora.
Yes.
Speak to us about it. Why are we having that challenges?
Yeah, yes, we will have that challenge. And my argument is coming from our ontological foundation. Now, if you look at this humanity in general, the dominant hegemony in humanity sense of ontology is materialism. And a materialist ontology leads to individualism because it leaves an appetite in your psyche for material accumulation of things. And so once materialism has encroached your psyche and your value system, and your sense of self-worth is built on materialism, then you become individualistic. That is my argument. And that's why we are finding it very difficult to trust ourselves, to work together, because everybody is looking at material gain. If you want to do something with someone, what is my gain? What can I gain from this person? What can I gain? What is in gain for me? Me. And that's what is happening, sir. One of the disadvantages of a materialistic view of life is depression, because material things cannot satisfy the void of finding meaning and purpose in life. So, and the damage that even going over to the ontology of our education system, I mean, I'm talking of the Western education system, is built on materialism. And it has also defined consciousness as a material interaction of matter. So you can see that, and it excluded completely the spiritual ontology of our existence. And in Africa, you know that in Africa, it is embedded in our ontology as spirituality. And so when you now embrace the ontological foundation of spirituality as a source of your identity, then you can now transcend the egotistical self for you to be able to live among your people as part of the same universal consciousness. And so my argument, again, is African psychology that is built on indigenous spirituality is the way forward.
Thank you so much for that. After this question, then we'll be moving to some of the solutions where we'll be asking you what we need to do, because we need to find a way out from where we are today. We are talking about unity among Africa, or African unity. Now, looking at it from the point of view of psychology, what is the implication of this unity among African people?
Oh, it is obvious that it has hampered our development. We are fragmented in our resources, in the unification of our effort to build. Go back to the story of the Tower of Babel, for those of you that believe in Christianity and subscribe to the idea. About the three Abrahamic religion, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, they all are built on the concept of the Torah. There was a Tower of Babel in the biblical historical theology. People were speaking the same language, and there was unity. It said that God came down and said, if these people continue in unity, they will achieve their goal. They want to be a tower to heaven. So what God did? He went to scatter their language. So they separated their language. So you can see that. What will make us to become unified is our language. What are we saying? Are we saying the same thing? Unity in communication, and that comes from your identity. But when your identity is built on materialism, you begin to see color. You begin to see racial difference. We don't see the African unity again. Is there? So, but if you see the African spirituality, that is the source of our mental transformation to build unity. I rest my case.
Thank you so much for that. And now let's consider some of the solutions, because that is important for us. You see, I was saying before that this concept, I didn't need to go to anywhere to study it. I just need to look at the life that I see people living, which I've participated in. I am a witness to it. I've seen it. I've participated. Now, if you are educated, even in my place, that same place where I grew up, you will lose this idea. You will no longer know this idea. Okay, now let's look at that education. I like what you said one time, that even though we criticize Western educational system in Africa, we are not going to totally eradicate it. It's not everything that is done by the European that is wrong. But maybe we need to approach it differently. Because idea, I think, and I don't define to be good or evil, but it depends on how you use it. Okay, they are neutral. That was the word I was looking for. These ideas are neutral. Because when the Europeans started to come to Africa, they were coming as students to learn. The idea that they learned in ancient Egypt, they took it home. It worked for them because idea work for you anywhere you go. It's the same.
Yeah.
If you take the principle
what you
please go. Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting you. Is that they are universal principles. So that is the concept. So when you look at the Western education, is built on certain universal principles. These principles are applicable because they are universal. Also, they are natural laws that are also universal. It does not respect your color, your gender. For example, gravity. If you jump, you will come down. There's no prayer or fasting or religious, whatever you believe in, is a law. A white man, a black man, a brown man, an African, an European, it's a universal law. Now, when you now look at Western education, what we're saying, the Western education philosophies that are built on universal principles and universal law, we cannot discard them. We can't discard them. And based on these universal principles and universal law, in the field of agronomy, in the field of science, agriculture, medicine, so they've been able to develop solutions that has embraced the unity and the dignity of humanity. It has improved the quality of life of the human on this planet. Now, what we are now saying, bringing those ideologies and those concepts into the African terrain, it's to be culturally sensitive. In what sense? That the application of those principles need to be contextualized and need to be indigenized. And that is what we're talking about, African psychology.
Thank you so much for that. I like that. In fact, I'm not going to make the preamble I was making because it's already clarified now.
You're welcome, sir.
That is so beautiful. All right. Now, how do we bring this idea of African unity or the concept of it so that the people can understand it into our educational system?
Yes. Now, the beauty of bringing the African psychology is that, it's a simple thing. Let me use this case scenario. 2 weeks ago, we have a group of professionals from Eswatini in our university. They just had the level 6 diploma in child psychology. So during the induction, I asked a question. A child that is born in Eswatini and a child that is born in London, what is the main difference? Of course, the socio-cultural context. However, that child biological psychology is the same. That is, they will develop in different phases, different stages, according to what? Biological psychology. However, the socio-cultural theory of learning will influence their growth. That tells you that even though the biological stages of development of a child in London and a child in Eswatini is the same, but the influence of the environment and the socio-cultural context will affect their growth. That is the reason why the culture is a key factor to the growth of that child. Therefore, when you are not studying the child psychology, you must be culturally bound and culturally sensitive. And that is what we're talking about, the African psychology. The African people have a psychology of their mentality, their intellectual life. They have a peculiar way of seeing things. They have their peculiar way that is of their own ontology, that is their sense of reality is very peculiar. So to deal with Africa, you cannot deal with Africa through an Eurocentric lens. And that's what we are advocating for.
All right. Thank you so much for that. That is vitally important. That is vitally important. And we are happy that you are here to sort of show the way. You see, you are really a highly valuable personality of our time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm not missing my word for that.
Thank you.
All right. Now, in practical terms, how do we inculcate this principle into the educational system? What are the things that we need to do, step 1, 2, 3, or maybe some of the way that our teacher can help us to help the children, therefore to help the society?
Absolutely. You have just mentioned it. Our teacher need to help us. So I said in my argument and my presentation, the first thing that we need to decolonize is the teacher education in Africa. Okay? And we are not only decolonizing, we are recreating an entire curriculum. However, it's still based on universal principles from the Western education philosophy. Okay? Principles of education, theories of learning. All these theories of learning are universal theories. But we are now bringing it into contextualization and making it indigenous to the African teacher education curriculum. And here in Elroy, I'm happy to let you know, as an ambassador of the State of African Diaspora, I'm working with the Minister of Education. We have established an African initial teacher training program that will enhance the decolonization process. The program is out there. And also, my book is about to be launched on the indigenous African curriculum. So, and that is the foundation, because education is the key for emancipation. I will say it again. Education is a key to emancipation. So therefore, we need to go through the route of education to bring unity in Africa. And it's starting from what? Curriculum decolonization and curriculum contextualization and curriculum indigenization. That is the step. And we are starting with what? The teacher education in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Of course, people need to look out for wherever you are present, because you are going with light, with radiating. All right.
Thank
Now,
you.
before you made mention of the African diaspora having a lot of possibility because we are here in the West. Of course, we mean now we're
Yes.
able to understand things differently from Africa. And because we are African, we understand African way of life and the European
Yes.
way of life. We are
Yeah.
powerful. We are more powerful in that sense. In that we know more than what the average European know, and we also know more
Yes.
than what an average African know. That is not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily to boast our ego. It's because that is
Mm-hmm.
our experiences. You learn based on many things, including also experiences. You are here. You see what is happening here. You
Mm-hmm.
can't tell me now that somebody is coming from your town, your village, your city. No matter how
Mm-hmm.
intelligent that person will be, we just want
Mm-hmm.
to know what you know in England, who have never been there. It is not
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
So
You too.
these people, we that are
Mm-hmm.
living in the diaspora, what
Mm-hmm.
strategy would you recommend for us to better promote African unity? Because this is what we are talking about today.
Yeah, so I mean, you made mention of us living in Europe, in the Western world. We African living in Western world as diaspora. Okay, why do we have that advantage? Because of our cross-cultural psychology. You see that our cross-cultural psychology, that we have been able to be raised and live in different culture, and you have survived, and you have also excelled, is an added advantage, you know. Now because traveling is part of education, exposure. And what happened to traveling? You are learning from other people's culture. You know, they said in Africa that you always think that your father's farmland is the biggest until you go out and see another farmland and say, oh wow, 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 wow. That is, my father's farmland is very small. I saw this. And Africa believe in traveling, especially, my culture here. I'm an Ijesha man. Is one of our fundamental value system. They call us Ijesha. Eleni Ateka. It means that they spread their mats, they spread their tentacles around. So Ijesha people from the Yoruba tribe, we always traveling. So it's in us. And then we also marry other races. It's very popular to me. I have. I mean, I was married to a Spanish woman. So I have that. It's part of my culture. So in Elisha, we have that. We marry white people. We are far. It's even popular among us. It tells you that we are very open-minded. That's the key thing. So in Africa, we are very open-minded. We are engaged in interracial marriage. That tells you that we believe in unity of humanity. And that's what we need to bring back. We need to bring that concept back within Africa. We need that. We Africa in diaspora, it's a must for us. It's non-negotiable. We must go back with our resources, with our intellectual capital, with our social capital, to invest back into our continent, because we have to stop importing foreign solutions to African people. No, we are Africans. We have been trained and understand, exposed in foreign knowledge. Then we are the foreign solution to African problem, not waiting on European to solve a problem for us. That is my argument.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. I appreciate it. For those that are listening to it, they also appreciate that because that is highly valuable and it's clear and straight to the point. All right, now those that have listened to us to this point, they want to learn more about you. They want to connect with you. So how can they learn more about you?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for this opportunity. Yes, I mean, you can contact A1 Classes. Obehi Podcast is there. You can contact us. Yeah, it's my brother. We are working together. And Aero London University is there. In fact, currently we are working with some NGO in the southern part of Africa, and we are massively involved with Africa. And through the university, because it's an indigenous university, don't get on us. We also have Europeans and Americans in our university that believe in indigenous people. So, but our core philosophy is not just only in Africa. The indigenous first world people is our focus. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. There is this beautiful idea that I like about people that are, because I don't like to use the word involved, but okay, let's say when you are aware, when you are more aware, you become lighter, you become freer, you are not heavy, Of course, we love our culture. Why don't we love our culture? But that is not the only thing we love. We love humanity. We love everything, because everything is part of it. It's not just because you have to be only Esan because I'm coming from Esan. If it is not Esan, it is not correct. No, I can learn from Hausa, which is far away from Asa. I can learn from Yoruba. I can learn from Indian people. I can learn from a Chinese. I can learn. Knowledge, again, is neutral. Let's absorb the one that we need to make ourselves better. So I love this universality of faith. This is very important. Thank you so much for that. So what is going to be your final take here, looking at the conversation of the day, African unity, and of course, how we can use it to build ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, the beauty here is that I've been privileged to be chosen as a roving ambassador of the State of African Diaspora, and I'm working with Her Excellency, the Vice Prime Minister, and the Minister of Education here. We are projecting and building a curriculum which is already built. We want to launch that, the curriculum on decolonization, and we are also starting from the teacher training education of our African people. And therefore, we believe that with this coming together as African diaspora, through the State of African Diaspora, we can bring our energy together, our resources together, and collaboratively we will be able to achieve that goal. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate you. And I appreciate, of course, also those that have listened to us to the end of this presentation. It will be valuable. And for your time, we don't take it for granted at all. We say thank you so much. And if you find any value in what we have discussed today, please let us know in the comment section below. And then you don't need to agree with us. Maybe you might have a different point of view. It's okay. We welcome all. We are not saying that you must agree with us. We are just sharing what we know. And we do not pretend to know everything. We don't pretend to be the world knowledge. We are speaking from our point of view, from the way, you see, the eye is in the front of us. We don't have eyes in the back. To see what is the back, we need the eyes of other people. So feel free to share, even if you disagree with us. So thank you for being here. And thank you so much, Professor Oluwafemi, for your time. I appreciate you, brother.
Welcome.